The announcement came at meal time, and within minutes the tennis world was in chaos. Alexa, the 20-year-old Filipina sensation, had just suffered the most brutal loss of her career, a 6-0, 6-2 defeat to Karolina Machova. The result dropped her ranking from number 29 to number 45. The expectation was simple. Rest, recover, reset for the clay season. Instead, she detonated a different kind of headline. In a short statement released through her management team, Eala announced she was canceling all major sponsor deals, effective immediately. Nike, the global giant that had flown her to Oregon and featured her in its iconic athlete tunnel. Milo, the brand that had just made her the face of a national campaign celebrating her rise. Gone just like that. For a player of her age and global momentum, these weren't just endorsements. They were the foundation of becoming one of the highest-paid young athletes in the sport. So why walk away? According to sources close to her, the loss to Machova didn't just shake her form. It shifted something deeper. Not her confidence, not her love for tennis, but her relationship with everything around it. The noise, the pressure, the constant pull of being more brand than athlete. And in that moment, she made a decision most players never dare to make. None of it matters if it costs authenticity. So she stepped away. March 23, 2026. Hard Rock Stadium, Miami Gardens. The match itself lasted exactly 1 hour. Machova, the 13th seed, delivered a clinical dismantling. The first set, just only 6 points conceded. By the end, Eala's record against Czech players had fallen to 0-13. For most players, a loss like that becomes a scar. For Alex Eala, it became a turning point. For most players, a loss like that would be a moment of despair. For Alex, it became something else entirely. When she sat down for her post-match press conference, there were no tears, no excuses, no self-pity, just clarity. She played really well, Eala said of Karolina Machova. And I definitely did not play my best, but that's also because of how she played. There are details I could have done better. Maybe it would have been more competitive. It was honest, controlled, almost surgical in its self-assessment. The loss dropped her from number 29 to number 45, a 16th place. The 390 points from her 2025 semi-final run were gone, replaced by just 120 from this year's fourth-round finish. On paper, it was brutal, but she didn't let the numbers define the narrative. I'm still really happy about this week, she said. Of course, I'm disappointed leaving the court today. That's normal. But, overall, very happy with my performance. Even when asked about pressure, the expectations of a nation, the weight of being seated for the first time, her response didn't crack. There was a little added pressure, more for myself than anything. But I handled it well. I wouldn't call it a big weight. I've done a lot of the work before this tournament. I'm happy with my progress. Those are the words of a player building towards something bigger. But beneath that composure, something was shifting. Because over the past year, Alex Eala hadn't just become a rising tennis star. She had become a phenomenon. Her jersey sales reportedly made up 57% of all merchandise at the Miami Open. Her face was splashed across billboards. Her name carried not just results, but an entire nation's energy. And that's where the tension begins. Because while her game was still evolving, her spotlight had already exploded. She understands that her story isn't just about tennis. It's about possibility, about showing a generation of young Filipinos that the path from local courts to the global stage is real. That message is what made her partnership with Milo so powerful. It wasn't just branding, it was identity. The same could be said for Nike, a relationship that had followed her from a 14-year-old prospect to one of the most recognizable young faces in the sport. The Sagita at Wimbledon, the portraits in Oregon, the campaigns in Manila. Every piece told the same story, a Filipina rising, carrying more than just a racket. But after the loss to Karolina Machova, that story started to feel heavy because somewhere between the campaigns, the expectations, and the global spotlight, the line had begun to blur. Was she still just a tennis player chasing improvement? Or had she become something else entirely? A symbol, a brand, a movement that never turns off? That's the question that lingered in the quiet after Miami. And it explains why walking away from those deals wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an act of recalibration. Decision to strip everything back to the core. The work, the game, the reason she started. Because while the world saw endorsements, billboards, and viral moments, Alex Eala was still chasing something much simpler: progress. And sometimes the only way forward is to let go of everything that isn't essential. Symbol, a brand, a role model on a scale she hadn't asked for. Her own Milo story had always been about inspiring others, starting from grassroots and chasing greatness. She had walked those same paths and attended the same clinics that had launched countless Filipino athletes. And now the campaign celebrated that journey in full circle. Milo has always been more than just the Filipino kid's favorite breakfast drink. Lawrence Laurico said it's been a companion in the journey of every Filipino champion. But as the billboards went up, as sales climbed, as magazine covers featured her smile, the noise grew louder. The demands intensified, the expectations mounted. And in the quiet aftermath of her loss to Carolina Machova, Ella realized she had lost something essential along the way: herself. So on the morning of March 25, 2026, through her management team, a brief statement dropped that sent shock waves through the tennis world. Alex Eala has made the difficult decision to cancel all major sponsorship agreements effective immediately. She is grateful for the support of her partners and the fans who have believed in her journey. She asks for privacy as she takes time to reflect on the next chapter of her career. No press conference, no grand announcement, no dramatic flourish, just a quiet, decisive statement and silence that was deafening. Nike executives, who had nurtured her as a global ambassador for years, scrambled to process the news. Snort's Milo, which had just launched a major campaign built around her story, was left with a gaping hole in its strategy. Phones rang and messages piled up, panic-stricken and desperate, but too late. According to sources close to Ella, the decision wasn't impulsive. She had been wrestling with it for weeks, confronting the weight of being not just a tennis player, but a symbol, a movement, a public persona on a scale she hadn't asked for, and ultimately deciding that the next chapter would be written on her own terms. Walked away from millions of dollars. One commentator noted, "It's a bold move, unprecedented in tennis, especially for someone her age." But for those who truly knew Alex Eala, the decision was nothing short of consistent with who she is. Honest, principled, and fearless. The loss to Carolina Machova had crystallized something she'd been feeling for months. The constant demands of being a commercial juggernaut were pulling her away from the sport she loved. At her post-match press conference, she had spoken about perspective. "I think for me right now, especially fresh after the loss, it's important to know that even though I had great wins, after a great win, I'm not all that good. And after a bad loss, I'm not all that bad." Now, she was applying that same perspective to her life off the court. Sponsorships that had made her a global star were also turning her into something she never wanted to be: a product. She didn't sign up to be a billboard. A source close to Ella told reporters she signed up to be a tennis player. Somewhere along the way, the tennis started feeling like the side gig. The sponsors, the appearances, the campaigns, they were taking over. She needed to take back control. It was unprecedented. In an era where athletes sign lifetime deals and chase endorsement dollars, I was walking away for millions. And yet, it was pure Alex Eala. When news of her decision broke, the Philippines erupted. Social media flooded with messages of support, confusion, and concern. The hashtag ILO overbrands trended for days. Some celebrated the move as proof of her integrity. "She's not for sale," one fan wrote. "She's not chasing money. She's chasing greatness. That's why we love her." Others worried about the financial implications. "She just walked away from millions," they cautioned. But for Ella, this wasn't about money. It was about reclaiming her life, her focus, and her journey back to the game on her own terms. Dropped to number 45 in the rankings. Another fan wrote, "The prize money isn't enough to sustain her career without sponsors. What is she going to do?" The reaction in the Philippines was immediate and intense. The Philippine Star, the country's largest newspaper, ran a front-page story under the headline, "Ella walks away from millions." The article traced her rise from the Rafa Nadal Academy to the global stage, questioning whether the weight of being a national icon had finally caught up with her. Milo, which had invested heavily in the My Milo Story campaign, issued a statement balancing disappointment with support. "We respect Ella's decision and are grateful for the time we shared together. Her journey continues to inspire us and we wish her all the best as she focuses on her tennis." Nike, by contrast, was reportedly blindsided. Years of investment, the custom Sampita hair tie at Wimbledon and the portrait displays at Oregon headquarters all suddenly seemed to hang in the balance. Behind the scenes, sources said Nike was already scrambling to understand what had gone wrong and how to win Ella back. Amid the controversy, Alex Eala turned her focus to what mattered most, the clay season. Lind Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros. The very surface she had honed her craft on at the Rafa Nadal Academy, developing the patience, tactical awareness, and baseline intelligence that had become her trademarks. The Czech curse remained unbroken. Her ranking had slipped from number 29 to number 45. The points lost in Miami would need to be earned back. But she carried something no ranking could measure: freedom. In her post-Miami press conference, she had already hinted at it, speaking with excitement about the clay season ahead. This was her chance to redefine the narrative, not as a sponsored phenomenon, but as a player in control of her own journey. "I'm super excited for the clay court swing," she said. "I think that's one surface where I definitely have a lot of room for improvement, so I'd love to see how it'll pan out this year." She also emphasized the importance of taking a break. "I think I will take a couple of days off. I did have maybe 2 days off after Indian Wells, but I'll take some again just to prepare well for the clay swing. It's going to be another long one. But now that break would mean more than rest. It would be about reconnecting with why she started playing tennis in the first place. Not for endorsements, not for fame, not for money, but for the love of the game." Paul Annacone, former coach of Roger Federer, had put it best earlier in the year. "She's got a smile that lights up a room. I remember last year when she beat Iga Swiatek, and she did it with a lot of grace and humility." Annacone suggested that it was that grace and humility that made Ella special. Not her ranking, not her endorsements, not her jersey sales. It was how she carried herself, treated others, and stayed true to herself even when the world was watching. Now, with the sponsors gone and the noise fading, Ella had a chance to reclaim that truth. Alex Eala's decision to cancel her sponsorships is more than a personal choice. It's a statement about the future of athlete endorsements and the burdens of being a national icon. For decades, the relationship between athletes and brands has been asymmetrical. Brands held the power. They controlled the narrative, the marketing, the profits. Athletes were paid for their likeness, but the brands owned the story. A has flipped that. She's reclaimed ownership, not just of her career, but of her narrative. The story is hers to write, and the game itself is next in line to follow. She has shown that an athlete's value isn't measured by endorsement deals, but by their connection to fans,